Every night, the battles raged. The clash of steel, the roar of monstrous beasts, the acrid scent of fire and blood. These were as familiar to her as the soft hum of her bedside fan. In her dreams, she was no ordinary woman. She was a warrior, a legend. She wielded a blade etched with ancient runes, slicing through nightmare creatures with practiced ease. Her armor bore the scars of countless victories, and her name was whispered with reverence across the lands of her dream world. And then she would wake up. Mira Dunham was just another 25-year-old, struggling through the monotony of modern life. She lived in a cramped apartment, worked a job she didn't care about, and had a cat who ignored her. She didn't believe in destiny or past lives. She barely believed in her alarm clock. But every night, without fail, she would return to the battlefield. The dreams felt so real, so tangible, that she could still hear the echo of her enemies' dying screams long after she opened her eyes. At first, she had chalked it up to an overactive imagination. Maybe she had played too many video games as a kid, or watched too many fantasy movies. But when she started waking up with bruises, deep, aching bruises in the exact places where her dream self had been struck, she knew something was wrong. One morning, she found a fresh scar tracing down her ribcage, a perfect match to the wound she had suffered in her dream battle against a horned beast. A week later, she woke up with dirt under her fingernails and the faint scent of blood on her pillow. She wasn't dreaming, she was remembering, and that was when the shadows began to move. The first sign came in the form of a flickering shadow in her apartment. Mira had been brushing her teeth when she saw it in the mirror, a dark, shifting silhouette standing just behind her. She spun around, heart hammering, but there was nothing there. Just her empty bathroom, just her own reflection staring back, looking as tired and pale as ever. But the feeling of being watched never left her. At night, the dreams grew more vivid. The battles became more desperate. She began to hear names whispered in the wind, names she had never heard before, but somehow knew belonged to the enemies she had vanquished in a life that wasn't supposed to be real. The worst part wasn't the dreams anymore. It was the waking world. She would catch glimpses of things moving in the corners of her vision, shapes that disappeared when she turned her head. The air around her sometimes grew thick, heavy with something unseen. Objects shifted when she wasn't looking. The bruises on her skin no longer faded as quickly as they should. Then, one evening, she found a single jagged claw mark on her bedroom wall. She had fought a creature with claws like that in her dream the night before. Something had followed her back. It started with small things. Her lights flickering, strange symbols appearing in the frost on her windows, the feeling of breath on her neck when she was completely alone. But then the world itself began to change. The city felt wrong. People seemed less real, as if they were actors on a stage, their movements slightly too rehearsed. Time skipped in odd ways. She would glance at the clock, look away, and when she looked back, hours had passed in an instant. And then came the first true attack. She had been walking home when the streetlights dimmed, one by one, until only darkness remained. A thick fog rolled in, swallowing everything. And out of the mist came a figure, its body draped in shifting shadows, its eyes burning like embers. It spoke no words, but Mira knew what it was. An old enemy, one of many. She ran, but the world twisted around her. Streets stretched endlessly, looping back on themselves. The figure pursued her relentlessly, silent and patient. She was not just being watched anymore. She was being hunted, and she had no idea how to fight back. The chase had become relentless. Mira could no longer pretend it was paranoia. Every corner she turned, every street she crossed, the darkness followed. The shadows in her apartment no longer flickered out of sight. They loomed, waiting, pressing closer. Desperation drove her to search for answers. She pored over books on reincarnation, past lives, dream symbolism, anything that might explain what was happening. None of it was enough. But the more she read, the more memories surfaced. The dreams were not just pieces of a past life. They were warnings. She had been a warrior, yes, but also a guardian. She had sealed something away long ago, something that was now breaking free. The scars, the whispers, the pursuit. It was all part of a prophecy she had unknowingly left behind for herself. One night, she stood before her mirror and did something she had never done before. Instead of running, she reached out. Her fingertips met the glass, and it rippled like water. The reflection did not mimic her. It stared back with knowing eyes. Eyes that belonged to someone older, someone who had fought and won before. And then she remembered everything. The enemy, the war, the final battle that had cost her everything. And worst of all, she remembered that she had not truly won. Something had been waiting for her return. And now, it was awake. The moment of recognition shattered the last illusion of normalcy. The past she had buried clawed its way to the surface, and with it, the full weight of her unfinished war. The dreams had never been just dreams. They were echoes of a conflict that refused to be forgotten, and now it demanded its conclusion. The creature stalking her was only the beginning. It was a harbinger, a fragment of the darkness she had once defeated. And now, it was not alone. The city began to shift in ways more terrifying than before. People vanished without a trace, swallowed by shadows. Buildings loomed taller than they should, their angles unnatural, their shapes shifting when no one was looking. The sky itself darkened, as if reality was fraying at the edges. And Mira, armed only with fractured memories and a destiny she did not ask for, knew that time was running out. The war she had ended was beginning again. And this time, the enemy would not let her escape. The sky cracked open with a sound like the earth splitting in two. The streets twisted, warping into battlegrounds long forgotten. Mira stood at the heart of the chaos, memories fully restored, power coursing through her veins like a long-lost friend. The enemy had come. Not just one, but many. The dark creatures she had once vanquished spilled into her world, their forms shifting between nightmare and reality. She did not run. She did not hide. She had been given a second chance to finish what she started. With a steady breath, she reached out, and her ancient blade materialized in her grasp. The final battle had begun, and this time, she would make sure they stayed dead. Every night, 12-year-old Sam stepped into a world where logic had no say. The sky changed colors on a whim, sometimes pink, sometimes plaid. Rivers flowed backward, and clouds had an opinion on everything. He was the legendary warrior of this realm, the fearless champion who battled absurd but terrifying enemies, from sock-stealing goblins to marshmallow giants that tried to smother him in sticky sweetness. It had always been a dream, of course. No matter how ridiculous or exciting, Sam would wake up to his normal life, where school was boring and sandwiches didn't try to eat him back. But one night, something changed. When he blinked his eyes open, expecting to see his familiar ceiling, he found himself still standing in the dream world. Something was wrong. He tried the usual methods, pinching himself, thinking really hard about waking up, even attempting the time-tested fall-off-a-cliff strategy. Nothing worked. The dream world remained, shifting and pulsing like it had a mind of its own. The talking trees whispered in hushed tones. The ground trembled beneath his feet, sending nervous ripples through the candy cane fields. Sam had never been trapped before. Desperate for answers, Sam made his way to the one being he trusted most in this world. His enchanted sword, Chad. Chad wasn't just any weapon. He was sarcastic, easily distracted, and spent most of his time complaining about how he'd rather be a legendary artifact in a kingdom that actually had air conditioning. But something was off about Chad, too. His usual glowing blade was dim, his once endless string of complaints reduced to a single, ominous statement. "The dream is breaking." Sam had no idea what that meant, but it sent a shiver through his bones. As if on cue, the landscape around him started to distort. The sky flickered between day and night, buildings twisted in impossible angles, and creatures from his past dreams, creatures he had defeated, began creeping back into existence. They weren't supposed to be here. Sam gripped Chad tightly and ran. He didn't know where he was going, but he knew one thing. If the dream was breaking, then something had to be holding it together. And if he found it, maybe, just maybe, he could wake up. Sam's journey took him to the one place he hoped never to see again, the kingdom of marshmallow giants. These sticky monstrosities had once tried to drown him in melted sugar, and he had only escaped by tricking them into roasting themselves over their own lava pits. But now, they were different. Instead of lumbering brutes, they stood in organized ranks, their gooey forms covered in makeshift armor. And worst of all, they remembered him. With a mighty squish, they charged. Sam barely managed to dodge, slashing through their sugary masses with Chad. But for every marshmallow that fell, another one reformed. He wasn't winning this fight. He had to think fast. Then it hit him. Dreams were built on rules, even the ridiculous ones. If he was trapped in this world, maybe he could bend those rules to his advantage. He closed his eyes, focused, and imagined the battlefield shifting. The marshmallow army stopped mid-charge as the ground beneath them turned into a boiling pot of hot cocoa. One by one, they plopped in, dissolving into the rich, chocolatey abyss. Sam didn't stick around to watch. He had a world to fix. Sam pressed on, navigating the ever-changing dream world. His next stop was Goblin Alley, home to the infamous sock-stealing goblins, who had been responsible for countless pairs of mismatched footwear back in the real world. But something was off. The goblins, usually mischievous but harmless, were now huddled together in hushed murmurs, their beady eyes darting about nervously. Sam crept closer, catching snippets of their conversation. "The dream is breaking. The nightmare is coming." Nightmare? That was new. Sam had fought plenty of bizarre creatures, but nothing called that. Before he could ask questions, a booming crack split the sky, and the dream world trembled violently. A deep, chilling voice echoed through the air, seeping into Sam's bones. "The hero has overstayed his welcome." The goblins shrieked and scattered as the sky darkened. Sam looked up and saw it, something massive shifting in the clouds, a shadowy presence with glowing red eyes. It had been watching him all along, and now it had decided to act. The air thickened with an unnatural chill, and Sam felt the dream world itself tremble in fear. Whatever the nightmare was, it was no ordinary foe. This wasn't some goofy marshmallow giant or a mischievous sock thief. This was something that had lurked in the corners of his dreams, waiting for its chance to strike. And now, Sam had given it the perfect opportunity by staying too long. The landscape began to twist violently. The candy cane fields withered into brittle gray stalks. The rivers stopped flowing, turning into frozen slabs of cracked ice. The plaid sky deepened into an inky black void, swallowing up everything familiar. Chad vibrated in Sam's grip, his glow flickering erratically. Bad. Very bad. The nightmare took form, a colossal being made of writhing shadows, its eyes burning like twin stars of malice. It loomed over Sam, its presence sending a wave of terror through his body. Sam had never felt fear like this before, not in any dream, not even in the real world. But he clenched his fists, forcing himself to stand tall. If this thing wanted to take over his dream, then it had picked the wrong hero to mess with. He wasn't done fighting yet. Sam knew he couldn't defeat the nightmare through brute force. This wasn't just another battle, it was a test. His dream, his mind, his imagination was under siege, and the only way to win was to take control. He shut his eyes, blocking out the nightmare's towering form. He focused, reaching deep into his thoughts. This was his world, his rules. And if the nightmare wanted a fight, then it would have to fight on his terms. The dream shifted. The sky exploded into brilliant daylight. The withered fields bloomed with oversized flowers. The nightmare recoiled, its form flickering, destabilizing. Sam smiled. Time to wake up. The nightmare let out a furious roar, but it was too late. The dream world crumbled, pulling Sam upward in a swirl of light. And just like that, he woke up, sweating, panting, safe, or so he thought. Because in the darkness of his room, something moved, and glowing red eyes blinked back at him.
If you like this video, then do subscribe to this channel